All right, today we're going to work on fractions and reciprocals. So a fraction can be thought of as a part, the numerator, over a whole, the denominator. The number above the fraction bar is the numerator, the number below is the denominator. On the ACT, they ask you to do some things like comparing fractions that have different denominators. They'll ask you to put these numbers in order from least to greatest or greatest to least. In order to do that, you have to find a common denominator. You also have to find common denominators whenever you're adding or subtracting fractions. You have to get the denominators to be the same, and then whatever you multiplied the denominators by, you have to also multiply the numerator by so that you can add those things together. And then you just add straight across at the top. You don't change the denominator once you've found that common denominator. For multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and then you reduce if possible. And your graphing calculators will reduce, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. For dividing fractions, you flip the numerator and denominator of the second fraction and you multiply. This is what, when you learned it, it was called keep, switch, flip. You keep the first term the same, you switch from division to multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. All right. Reciprocals, this is where we come into a little bit more difficult of a concept. The reciprocal of a number is the multiplicative inverse of that number. And that's a big kind of statement to say that when you multiply the two numbers together, the result is going to be 1. So every number has a reciprocal except for 0, because 1 over 0 is undefined and you can't have 0 in the denominator. That comes into play a lot in solving rational equations, which we'll talk about later. So when you have something like 5, the reciprocal becomes 1 over 5. If you have a fraction, you flip the fraction. So if you had 2 over 3, the reciprocal would become 3 over 2. All right. And then here's a type of a question that you would see on the ACT. When 7 2/3 is written as an improper fraction in lowest terms, the numerator of the fraction is. So the way we take a mixed number and write it as an improper fraction is you multiply the whole number by the denominator, and then you add the numerator to whatever you had. So in our fraction, our mixed number here, we have 7, which is the whole number. 2 is the numerator, 3 is the denominator. So 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 2 is 23. So our numerator would be 23. The denominator would be 3, but they only asked us for the numerator, which is 3. All right. I'm going to send you some practice questions. They are a little bit more difficult. So if you need help with any of those, like if the explanation provided doesn't make sense, please let me know so I can also do a little video about the explanations. And then here I'm going to show you with the fractions on your calculator. Sorry, I hope this glare from my light on the ceiling isn't too bad. All right, so if we have something like, I gotta move this paper because I think it's pulling that on there. All right, so if we have something like let's say 15 over 21. We want to type that in as a fraction. You hit alpha, y equals, whoops, wrong one. You hit alpha y equals, and then enter, and it lets you type in a fraction. Hopefully you can see that there. So I'm going to do 15 over 21. Oh my gosh. All right, so 15 over 21, and then we hit enter, and it will simplify that fraction for us. Ooh, it's hard to see here. It's not like in my reflections. All right, so there you go. 15 over 21 would reduce to 5 over 7. So your calculator will do that. If you end up typing in the division, if you do 15 divided by 21, like you would normally type in a fraction, and then you hit enter, it's going to give you this decimal. To change that decimal into a fraction on your calculator, you hit math, and then enter twice. Enter, and it changes your decimal into a fraction in lowest terms. All right. So use your calculator. It is your friend. If you have any questions about that or the questions from the practice test, again, please let me know. Thanks.